What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another video today, and in this video we are doing the 98th installment of Retro Reviews. Today we're going to be reviewing my Gemini Jets 1:400 scale Courtline British Aircraft Corporation 111 Series 500. This is a very unique aircraft type for the collection, and not one that I purchased myself. My parents actually surprised this to me over Christmas a few years ago, and I never thought I was going to add a Courtline aircraft to my collection. I remember when NG released a Courtline TriStar with the yellow livery, and I didn't really think that Gemini had ever touched this subject, but they certainly did, because they did have a BAC 111 mold for some time, which, God, I don't know when they last used it in 400 scale. This is probably one of the last releases, coming back in December of 2008, so nearly 17 years ago from this video being released. That is quite insane. But as for Courtline itself, I like to describe them as the European Braniff, just because they had a bunch of colorful planes, a very similar concept to what Braniff had, and what they became well known for in later years. So I'll go ahead and start off with a box, like we always do. Typical Gemini Jets box for the time, which hasn't really changed much, minus some minor alterations to some fonts and just general layout stuff. But you have the Gemini Jets logo, made for collectors by collectors, image of the plane, Courtline logo, and the BAC 111 Series 500 titles. Not really a logo per se. There's the inside with the plastic cradle, and then up here is all the aircraft information. And since this is a little bit more of a unique aircraft type, I'll let you look at this for a little bit longer. A very unique type for sure, and ironically enough, Braniff was actually one of the few operators here in the US to have the BAC 111, and American had some as well for some time. There's the bottom of the box. Right side you have the Gemini Jets logo, image of the plane. Item number is GJCOU 206. Top of the box, left side, and then the back, which is correctly labeled as a 2008 release. Yeah, BAC 111. So this is not the base variant. I think some of you may have been able to figure it out since it's labeled as a Series 500. It actually had some of the shorter variants, like the Series 200, which is what both Braniff and American had for some time, back in like the 60s and even into the early 70s, a little bit before these aircraft were retired, since they didn't really resonate well with most of the US airlines. But they did find a nice little home overseas. But I must say, this pink livery is really nice. It was my mom who picked this one out because she obviously likes pink, which it definitely looks nice on this aircraft. I can't really say too much about it in the negative context. Starting off, we have the very pointy nose cone, anti-glare shield. There's the cockpit windows along with the aircraft name, which is Halcyon Breeze. Most of Courtline's aircraft were named after something like that. Then we have the L1 door, and then the nose gear right there. The wheels do roll, though it looks like it's going to fall off. And I think this is actually an Aero Classics mold, because I don't think JC Wings, which is who Gemini Jets typically partners with for mold usage and whatnot nowadays, I don't think they've ever had a BAC 111. But there's the Courtline titles underneath the passenger windows. Looks pretty standard for most other passenger aircraft. Move to the overwing section there. There's some red text above what I would presume to be some emergency exits, though they're not really labeled correctly, so probably just open up the windows and get out of the plane there. There's also a wing seam right there, and then the registration of Golf-Alpha X-Ray Mike Foxtrot, along with the Rolls-Royce logo there on those engines, which are very loud from the few videos I've seen on YouTube of these things taking off. There aren't really any good videos of these BAC 111s just roaring out of an airport. I think there's only like one I've ever found that's like really good, but all the others are either, it's silent video or it's from far away, like you can't really hear it up close. But there's a tail which has a little Courtline logo. It's a bit hard to see there with this pink livery that they had on this particular airframe. Right side of the aircraft, not too much to report on there. But you do have all your applicable details on the side that you could ask for. Very, very lovely. And specifically for the BAC 111, on the Series 500, they had the Rolls-Royce Spey Mark V 12-14DW turbofans. And like I said, these things were super duper loud. They did not have any sort of hush kits or any technology that would quiet the engines there. It would reduce the noise that it outputted. So these things were super duper loud, and that's what made a lot of people love these things, just because they're so loud. But hey, hopefully I get to see another one of these, because I did see the shorter 111 in Kansas City. TriStar Experience has one of them alongside their L1011. Underneath of the aircraft, which is all painted in like this orange-esque color. It goes from like a pink to, I don't know if I'd really describe it as orange, more like it's kind of like a tan color in a way. It's like a unique tan, I would say. It's a little more vibrant on camera than what it appears to the naked eye, at least for me. But you do have the registration printed there, along with the Gemini Jets logo. Stand hole, landing gear, a little anti-tail skid thingamajig right there that's molded on, and the top there should be I don't see any beacons, but there's a whole bunch of printed details on the top, which actually looks really cool. You can kind of see it on the pink there, and then all the wing details on the white painted wings and also on the horizontal stabilizers. Very awesome model from Gemini Jets, and I'll definitely take a look and see what BAC 111s that Gemini has produced over the years, which I don't think they made too many. Like I said, Braniff and American Airlines here in the U.S. had these aircraft types. They're really the only major airlines in the U.S. that ever had them, but they didn't last very long. And I do need a Braniff one for Retro FSD, because we did get them for a brief period of time in the 60s, right before they exited Sioux Falls. We'll save that for another time, though, as we'll take a look at the real-life aircraft's history. She first flew sometime in 1969 and was delivered to Altair International. Now, this was the original branding for Courtline Aviation way back when. She was delivered to them in December of 1969 with the same registration and aircraft name. Courtline became the official branding starting in 1970, and she was with them for a few years. Then she went back to British Aircraft Corporation in September of 1974 as they looked for a new buyer, presumably. And they were able to find one before year's end with Trans-Brazil, who took her, re-registered her to Papa Tango-Tango Yankee Victor. Then she went down to Argentina for a little while, starting in January of 78, re-registered to Lima Victor-Mike Echo X-Ray for Austral Líneas Aéreas. Then she went to Air Patagonia in August of 1995, also in that same region. So with the previous operator, she was with them for around 17 and a half years, which is pretty cool. Then she came back to the UK, went to the European Aviation Group starting in June of 1996. She was re-registered several times under their ownership. First to Victor Romeo-Bravo Echo Delta, or VR Bed, not virtual reality bed. She was then re-registered to Victor Papa-Bravo Echo Delta in April of 97, and then again to Golf-India Hotel in June of 97. She was ultimately scrapped in 2001 as the aircraft had reached the end of her life. So like I said, awesome little model from Gemini Jets, and I'll go ahead and pull up the model aircraft database, better known as MADB, to get a good sense as to what Gemini Jets has produced, especially with the BAC 111. So like I said, it's not a very popular aircraft, I would say, just because you don't really see too many of these things flying around, and they didn't really make too many of them. But within that BAC 111, well, MADB doesn't say that they ever made any, but maybe that's just because it's not labeled correctly. So I'm going to do some digging here. Okay, yeah, so it just wasn't labeled correctly when I initially clicked on it. But in 1 to 400 scale, they actually made 9, which is a bit surprising considering that they haven't really used the type that much. But, oh yeah, US Air did have them for a little while as well, way back when. And then they did a British Airways type in August. They actually did a whole bunch in 2008. This Courtline one was the last one they did that year. And if you'll note on the photo that MADB has, that they actually had a pre-production sample version pictured, which had the hush-kitted engines, which obviously this thing didn't have since hush kits really weren't a thing back then. So they did correct that before it got released publicly. So good catch there by Gemini. They did the American one November of 2008. In 2009, they did British Caledonian, the Royal Air Force of Oman, and Mohawk Airlines. That's another U.S. carrier that did have these things. They were from out of the Northeast, if I remember right. And then 2010 was the last time that they used this. Dan Air London with a Series 500, and then Aer Lingus a Series 200. So Yeah, they did the Series 200, the 400, and the 500. They've never done a Series 300, but I don't think that type was very popular compared to the 200 or the 4 and 500 variants. So that'll do it for this episode of Retro Reviews. We are now 2 away from the century mark. We're very excited to hit this mark as we head towards year's end. Random Model Airport's also going to be hitting the century mark, which I've done my calculations and I figured out that right at the start of 2026, in January, we will hit number 100. We'll finish the year off with 99 Random Model Airports. So once we head into the new year, we'll celebrate that occasion, and I will definitely have something cooked up for that series as well. But as for Retro Reviews, be on the lookout for something fun here. I'll have to see what I can come up with, but I'm sure this will be something you guys will like. With that being said, that is the end of the video. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.